it the Mario test.
Yo, what's up, everybody? This is the BronxTales podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm here with your host, Louis Vanaria. I am your co-host, Dean James Silva, and we are going to talk about the classic movie, A Bronx Tale, and how Louis Vanaria became a.k.a. Crazy Mario. Now, Bronx Tale is one of my favorite movies. Every time I talk to somebody about it, it's always like, okay, it's Godfather, Goodfellas, then A Bronx Tale. So, you know what? I just want to start by saying this is one of my most favorite movies, and I'm so excited to hear the story because I know Louis for a while. So, you know what, Louis? I'm just going to let you take over, buddy. Take over, my friend.
I got to tell you first. This is our first podcast.
Yes.
This is actually but you've done podcasts. You have your own podcast, right? Mm-hmm. This is my first podcast.
Okay.
Not just for this show. I've never done a podcast before. So I want to thank you for that. Now, also, I don't want to still be living the fact that the Bronx Tale thing and riding that wave, but the name for a podcast, Bronx Tales, is so clever because it's going to be about telling stories. How can you what else can I call it, right?
Exactly.
Is that a perfect name? Bronx Tales, and I am from the Bronx, so maybe it's not even about the movie. It's about me because I'm from the Bronx. I don't know why we had to come to the Bronx today to do this podcast. I would have done it. I would have rather do it in beautiful Westchester, or not that the Bronx isn't beautiful, but.
Well, I figured since it's our first podcast of Bronx Tales podcast, and why not come to the Bronx and do the first one here?
Right. So I could take off my bulletproof vest
now. Now, Bronx Tales is so brilliant, I think, because one thing, I know you, I've been friends with you for a few years now. I think it's actually like 15, but...
When you say Bronx Tales, do you mean the podcast or the film?
Actually, I mean the podcast right now.
Okay.
Talking about the brilliant name, Bronx Tales, is one of the best, and I always told everyone, one of the best storytellers I've ever heard is you.
Me.
When you tell a story...
Don't put the pressure on me.
No, but when you tell a story, it's so 3D, and it's like, always tell like the greatest stories. So I knew like when I had a chance to do this podcast with you that it was going to be awesome. But how did it start? Take us back to this. Take us back to that day where you were when you opened up that newspaper or whatever it was and you saw Robert De Niro, directorial debut, Bronx Tale. Like, take us back to that
Well,
day.
before I did Bronx Tale, I did a pilot called Married to the Mob for CBS. And that was there was a movie in the 80s with Matthew Modine and Michelle Pfeiffer called Married to the Mob. And they recasted the part of Matthew Modine and Michelle Pfeiffer, and they were going to do a new cast. And I got a part of one of the kids, and that kind of got me an agency and stuff like that. So then CBS didn't pick up that show. So then a couple of months later, I got the audition for Bronx Tale. But we're going to get into my music and stuff. So I thought maybe, because I knew it was the 1960s, and I thought maybe I could write some music for it, because my music is kind of a little retro. So I thought maybe I could write music for it. So I went down. They didn't want to know anything about my music. But on my way out, Jill Greenberg was one of the casting, and Ellen Chenoweth was the other casting agent, who's very big right now. And they said, you have such a character face. And they said, we'd like to see you read. And again, I said, I'm a singer, because I was really concentrating on music, which I am now. But they said, you have a character face, we'd like to see if you can read. So they gave me the part. Now, can you curse on
Absolutely.
on
Say whatever the
podcast?
fuck you want.
Okay. They gave me the part to read about the girl going down, like giving you a blowjob in the car.
The Crazy Mario test?
The Crazy Mario test,
Basically,
yeah.
what made you famous.
It came to the Mario, yeah. And so I read the part, and I said to myself, I know this guy. Growing up in the Bronx, you knew the guys. I took it as, I had to make the character real. So I had to think of somebody who would speak like that. I don't necessarily, but I knew guys in the Bronx that talked always like that, but it meant like the guy who always says that he's getting blowjobs and getting laid are the guys who aren't.
Right.
So I said that's who this character is.
Right.
He's the guy who talks about how big his dick is, and that those guys always say, you know, the guys
There's
who talk
those
about
with
how
the
big.
small penises.
Yeah, those are the ones with the small ones. Right. So I said that's who this guy is. So that's how I read it. I read it like a guy who. But the best part about those guys is you believe them. They believe it. They believe themselves so much. So that's the way I did it. And they liked it, and they said, if we roll camera, will it get you nervous? And I said no, because already I was singing on stage and stuff like that. So rolling a camera with people watching me never got me nervous. I'm actually more nervous doing this podcast than when I auditioned. So then I read the Mario test again on camera, and about a week later, I get a call from the Tribeca office, and they said, Bob saw your tape and really would like you to come in and read for him. I didn't know who they were talking about when they said Bob, but they were talking about Robert De Niro.
Oh my God!
And the night before, I had seen Cape Fear, which was in the theaters at the time, which is a bad movie to see before you meet. Before you meet him, you think you're going in to meet Max Cady, you know?
Oh my
like
God.
I wasn't nervous enough. So I go down to Tribeca. I was so young, I didn't even have a license, so my father had to drive me down. And I went in, and there were like about 10 to 12 kids there in the office before we got called up. His office we were on like the 8th floor, and his office was on the 9th floor, but it was an open office, so you can see the door up there, and you just knew he was in there. It was like amazing. And there were like 12 kids there, and they were all reading for the part of Crazy Mario. And they'd come out of the office on the 9th floor and look down at you while you're sitting on these couches. Then they'd go, Louis Vanaria, and you go up and you walk up these stairs. And I was a wreck, you know. It's like being called into a doctor's office, or dentist.
Okay, so this is when you're going in to meet De Niro now.
Yeah, so I went in, and Chaz was in the room.
Chaz
Palminteri, who wrote the film, and the two casting girls, one girl working the camera, one girl just there, and De Niro, who they told me to call him Bob, but I couldn't. I called him Mr. De Niro.
Okay.
And he let the girls and Chaz run the audition. He sat way in the back of the room. It was a pretty big room. He sat way in the back of the room, not to intimidate the actors. He didn't say much. He just sat way in the back and watched. So that kind of made me feel a little more comfortable. He wasn't in my face kind of thing. He sat way back. And then I did my thing. I felt like I did a good job. Week later, a couple of days later, they called me. They want to see me again. So I went in again to Tribeca. And now there were like 4 kids there reading for Crazy Mario. And I did the same thing.
But hold on one second. I just wanted to, just for the Meerkat people.
Uh-huh.
Right now we're here live with Louis Vanaria from A Bronx Tale. He's telling the story about how he got the audition for Crazy Mario as A Bronx Tale. Go ahead,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So now this is the second audition, and there were like, from 12 kids, there were like 4 or 5 kids, all reading for my role. And I went in and I did the job again. And this time he rather than sit in the back, he came over to me and he talked to me and he asked me where I was from and my background, and he was trying to get to know me a little more, which he didn't speak to me the first time. So a couple of days later after that, I get a call to come down and read for him again. And I'm saying to myself, I'm thinking what I did wrong, because why would they want to see me so many times to do
So
this?
this is your third now.
My third audition, and I'm reading the same role. I'm reading the same part of Crazy Mario, and I'm doing the Mario test. And this time when I went down, there were like 5 kids there. But there was nobody reading for Mario. There was Slick. There was a kid reading for Slick. There was a kid reading for C. His name was Phil Barbarino, actually. There was a kid reading for Nicky Zero. And that was it. And I said, okay, this is interesting because there's no other Crazy Mario here. So now I'm thinking I'm going to go in and read for somebody else. I didn't know what was going on. So they called all of us up, all of us at the same time, which they didn't do at the first 2 auditions.
Right.
They called us all up. And we all stood there and we all did our part. And he was looking at us like as if to see if he believed that we can be 4 good friends who grew up in the same neighborhood. And these are they're strangers to me. And I was the only kid from the Bronx, actually. Joey was from Brooklyn. Phil Garbarino was from Long Island. Forgot who else. Nicky Zero, who's Dominic Lombardozzi. He was from the Bronx.
CeeLo wasn't even there then.
No, I was going to get into that. So after that, they took us. They took us downstairs, and the casting agent said to us. They said, "Listen, guys, we'll probably read you again. You probably have to do a test on screen, on film, a screen test. But we're pretty sure that you guys are our Bronx Tale boys. Wow. But it's not official, so I wouldn't. So please don't tell anybody. But Bob's really." He likes these are the ones he picked. So we went out that night and we were like on a high. And then the next day,
the Garbarino kid didn't know.
Right, Phil. I'll tell you who Phil was. He was in the movie. He shot Chaz at the very end.
Okay,
that was Phil Garbarino. He was a good kid. But the next day, the casting agents who De Niro was, they were working so hard to find these Bronx Tale kids. They worked so hard that they took a day off and they went to Jones Beach. And they were laying on Jones Beach, and this kid came out of the water, and it was Lilo Brancato. And he had a mole on his face right where De Niro's mole is, and he looked exactly like De Niro. And they said, "Oh my God, that looks like his son for real." And they asked him if he ever did any acting, if he heard about this. He knew nothing, but he did a dead-on De Niro impersonation. Lilo is amazing at doing impersonations. He'll meet you once and he'll do a dead-on impersonation of you. So he did his De Niro impersonation.
Okay.
And they left Jones Beach with him and his brother, took him to an office where they can film him, sent it to Bob De Niro, and De Niro said, "We got to get this kid on a screen test right away." And they sent him to a screen test.
God.
And Phil Garbarino was told that he was out.
Oh
and
my
Lilo,
God,
and Lilo
that's so
was
awesome.
in.
Wow.
Yeah. But was it a curse? I don't know, because Lilo had some trouble after that. But
Yeah, and we're gonna actually get into that on some maybe
second
later on, maybe on a second or third podcast. We can we're gonna get hopefully him to talk about it and
right.
stuff like that.
So that was 20-something years ago.
And you're still considered, like, I know from being.
But I hate that because I've done other stuff. But
I know you're being friends with you, and please tell us what you're doing actually currently. What's the projects you're working on right now?
Well,
I know you
mentioned
just did something with my favorite, the Will and Grace girl. I love her.
Oh, I just did an episode
Deborah
of
Messing?
Yes, I did an episode of
she's
Mysteries.
beautiful.
Yeah, she was sweet too. I did an episode of Mysteries of Laura, which is an NBC show. I just did one episode. I played a lawyer, which is funny because I never went to college.
Oh my God! Usually, and one of the biggest things Louis Vanaria is known for in movies and films is getting killed.
Yeah.
You've been killed in like.
Oh, let's
10
talk about
different
that.
films
Yeah,
you've been in.
I've been killed a lot. I mean, obviously, Bronx Tale, I was blown up in a
Matter
car.
of fact, we're gonna do a segment on Bronx Tales called "Let's Name the Killing Movie of Louis." Like, Louis is killed. What movie is this one?
Yeah.
Every week we'll do a new one.
I've been
Name the
killed.
movie.
I've been killed a lot.
Now,
I did a movie called Stiffs, where it was shot in the north end of Boston with Danny Aiello, and I drowned in that.
Boardwalk Empire.
Boardwalk Empire, I was shot in the head. Yeah, well, I tried to kill Nucky,
Right.
and I got news for you. When you try to kill the lead in a show, and you don't kill him, and you botch the hit, and you shoot the girl in the back.
That's your last episode?
No, I did 2 more. They got me 2 more, 2 or 3 episodes later, but you know your days are numbered when you try to kill the lead and you don't kill him.
That's so funny.
I did a movie. I was killed in a couple of Law and Order
NYPD
episodes.
Blue?
I wasn't killed in NYPD
I remember
Blue.
that episode.
That was a long time ago.
You did the clothes in the back of a van. You were selling clothes.
That's right. That's
I remember
right.
that.
That's
I
right.
remember.
What was funny about NYPD Blue, it was called NYPD Blue, and I had one scene on the street of New York and one scene in
Los Angeles?
Yeah, the interiors were shot in Los Angeles, and the exteriors were shot in New York.
That's funny.
So most of the show was shot in L.A., and it was called NYPD Blue. And that was the first time I went out to L.A. They flew me out there to do that scene in the office when they interrogated me. And a couple of years later, I had to go back out to L.A. to do the Kirk show.